we tend to go into a triangle of knowledge, as I call it, where we start with this broad base. And then the more and more we go into grad school, we tend to narrow our knowledge a little bit. And the piece of advice that she told me is like, don't be that triangle of knowledge. Yes, you can be an expert of one single thing, but you can be actually an expert of many things.
All right. Good afternoon or good morning, where depending on where you're tuning in from. I'm Jeff Kozlowski. I'm a marketing communications manager here at the School of Medicine and Dentistry, supporting our graduate education, postdoctoral affairs. Thanks again for tuning in to another live career discussion with us here on LinkedIn. Excited to have Kaisha Gonzalez join us here in a moment. But before we bring her on, just a few things I want to mention here at the top. If you haven't seen promotions of it, we are turning these live streams into podcast episodes. It's known as the Next Step Podcast. It lives on YouTube and YouTube Music. We are starting to roll out older episodes on Apple and Spotify, so you can eventually we'll get caught up, but you can start checking out some of our older episodes there. But yeah, if you want to check out some other episodes, this QR code right here in the top left will take you to the YouTube playlist. So be sure to check that out. Today's guest, Kaisha Gonzalez, she graduated in 2012 from our Microbiology and Immunology program. She also received her master's here. She did our prep program, which we'll talk more about. She is now a senior principal scientist for scientific affairs at DiaSorin Molecular LLC. She works remotely from the DC area. So we're going to talk all about what exactly scientific affairs is. What does a senior principal scientist do on a daily basis? So, okay. So first, Kaisha, I know I did a very brief introduction there at the top, but let us know a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, definitely. So, originally, born and raised from Puerto Rico. So, I'm going to roll my R's here because Spanish is my first language. And if I have to describe a little bit of myself, I like to use my three objectives, which is pretty much I'm a wife, mother, and a scientist. So I'm a wife for a computer engineer and mother of two amazing, sometimes too smart for their age boys. And as you mentioned, I'm a scientist. I'm a senior principal scientist for scientific affairs at DiaSorin Molecular Division. Um, and just to explain a little bit about DiaSorin as a company, and then a little bit going into that role, what I do. DiaSorin is pretty much like a biotech diagnostic company. They design and manufacture in vitro diagnostic reagents for the use of either immunodiagnostics or molecular diagnostics. Sometimes either for infectious diseases, which is my major role here as a company, but also genetic testing, some biomarkers, and so forth. So that's pretty much. I've been with the company. It's going to be almost 10 years. So it's been a really nice career for me here.
Almost 10 years. Yeah, that's great. And we'll talk more about that specific role here in a minute. Kaisha, let's go back a few years and I want to talk a little bit about how you discovered Rochester. I mentioned that you did attend our prep program to kind of kick off your tenure in Rochester. And for those that aren't familiar with our prep program, I'll drop a link to that in the comments so you can learn a little more about it. But that's our post-baccalaureate research education program. But yeah, Kaisha, I just want to hear kind of how you discovered Rochester and what ultimately made you want to attend.
Yeah. So how I discover was through the prep program, definitely. But the way I got into that point during my undergrads, actually, I had the opportunity to also participate in a similar program as what is PrEP, and it's the McNair Scholar Program. McNair is it's in honor of Ronald McNair, who was the astronaut and physicist who perished during the Challenger in the '86. He was, I believe, the second African American astronaut being included for a NASA mission. And his family actually created this program for first generation students to pretty much go for doctoral studies, through research and then other activities. So through my days in McNair, that's how I then discovered PrEP. They actually pointed out to increase a little bit more of that biomedical research opportunities. Since I was interested at that time to go for my master's and PhD, I honestly didn't know exactly which field at that time. I was between microbiology a little bit and virology as well, but also I was very interested in forensics, which pays a little bit of my career as well, a little bit of the forensic science. And so I actually, the director program of McNair pointed out PrEP, and I did apply for two different PrEP programs. One in upstate New York, University of Rochester, and the other one was actually in San Diego, University in California. So it was very like two portal aside, from the East Coast and West Coast, and coming from Puerto Rico, obviously, I was like, let's see which one makes more sense for me as part of career. And I end up actually choosing University of Rochester. So I love, Rochester is so small town, college town. I loved that ambience. It was going to be a big transition for me because, of course, the winters, being from a tropical island and then jumping into, I would not say harsh winters, but long winters. Yes,
That's
definitely.
that's fair.
So I decided to go there, and at that time, Steve Dewhurst was the director of PrEP, and I did my whole interviews, and I love the program. So I actually stayed 2 years at that time in the program. So
And then was it just kind of once you finished up prep, was it just kind of a natural transition to a doctoral program? Kind of what made you want to stick around?
yes, definitely during the prep years, I did have the option to attend classes, right? So I started familiarize myself with the faculty, to some of the curriculum, and I mean, you already starting building that networking as part of as a prep student, and beyond what the time the program can offer me, like that microbiology immunology combination of a department. I think that was the thing that sold me, because I wanted a little bit of um, capture a little bit of the field from that my microbiology side and immunology, which goes so well in hand. So I did apply for other grad school, but ultimately, I mean, I love Rochester as just being there. At the time, I was with my fiance, who is my husband now, and he also created some roots there, and I did, and I'm like, there's no brainer. I love it here. I love the people, already the faculty, the program in general. So we stayed, and it was an easy transition for me just to stay for my master's and PhD there.
Yeah, and remind me, you kind of always knew you weren't going to like after graduate school, you weren't going to go the academia route, right? You always had an intention to go a different path.
Yes, yes. And I might get in trouble here, right? Because it tends to be so taboo when it comes to talk about industry a little bit in the academia world. But I honestly never saw myself as just in the academia. Like, my mindset was already, I want to do different things. I want to, um, in all honesty, I think one of the biggest thing was grant writing. I'm like, I don't think I can do that. And which, in all honesty, I still do some writing, right, as part of my job. But I always wanted, yeah, definitely industry side or even the clinical laboratory settings. Like I wanted to do research in the clinical labs or doing the industry side, which I did a little bit of both in my transition to the industry. Um, and I don't regret it, honestly. So
And was there anything, that you can remember or pinpoint that you did to kind of set yourself up to go that path? Like while you were in grad school, was it conversations you had or resources you used?
So definitely, I mean, I always won my PhD. Like,
Hmm.
it opened doors definitely to have your master's and PhD. And of course, the level of work that you can do beyond academia, from even the industry side helps. Now, having a PhD is not an absolute, right? It's not in that's something that, okay, I'll have a job for sure. It's not but it helps pretty much open a lot of doors, right? Because you're already proving that you are this type of student who took the time to develop yourself, to actually develop, public speaking, because you have to do a lot of seminars as part of the grad school. You have to defend
Hmm.
your thesis in front of an audience, right? So there's those skills as a part of grad school that you acquire, as part of the PhD program that you acquire, that helps um, give you that advantage when it comes to jumping into the industry side or even the clinical setting. So I already knew I wanted that title just to help me open the doors. Now, that's just opened the doors a little bit, but you still have to burst into that door with other skills, right? So those are the things that you have to develop later on in
Yeah.
picking exactly what you do strategically.
And so you didn't go right into the scientific affairs space. You did start out as a DNA analyst. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, so this is where it goes back into me deciding where to go in terms of my master's and PhD. I did under during my undergrad years, I did a forensic project. I was part of. I applied into this minority health disparity program at the University of Arizona in Tucson, and as part of my summer project was a forensic project, and I love it. Like I really love the whole forensic and the DNA side of things. So I always, once I graduated um, from U of R, I had this fork in the road. I can go to a postdoc and continue a little bit of what I was already doing during my grad school years, or just completely go into a 360 and do something very different, which was my forensic work. So I did apply as a forensic DNA analyst, which is pretty much a forensic biologist. Um, so all my background, I use it, and it's pretty much I work in this private lab, analyzing, examining, identifying biological samples for DNA profiling, and then that DNA profile is used to identify victims or potential suspects in a lot of the crimes. So that was pretty much, and I have to say, it's not like CSI, right? I did have questions like that. Even from my family, it's like, oh, you're doing CSI. And I'm like, no, I'm a I'm a biologist, works with DNA, so I work in the lab. Oh, so you're like bones. And I'm like, no, as an anthropologist, closer, but no. So there's this misguidings, right, of what you see in the TV versus real world. And it's not that glamorous, but it's very satisfying, of course, because the type of job that you do to help sometimes victims. So
And then, so you were, I think, just looking at your LinkedIn profile, that lasted a little over a year, and then you started to make the transition to scientific affairs. So, um, how did you get into that, and what did that transition look like?
So yes, so definitely. So during my forensic years, my boss at the time, he wanted to expand on a different department of infectious diseases, and having my background as a microbiology and immunologist from U of R, he is like, well, you have a PhD, you know this background, so figure it out. And pretty much he gave me the task of creating this new department within the forensic lab to expand. At that time was a viral load testing monitor. So that's usually this type of test that quantifies the viruses, especially for transplant patients. So at that time, we brought into the lab a system. At that time was called Focus Diagnostics, the company, and the integrated cycler system. And that's actually how I met my current colleague, which I'm gonna shout out because I do appreciate she saw something in me at that time, Dr. Poyana Rodopolek. She actually trained me on the system and doing this infectious disease viral load testing. And really love what she was doing. She was training me, she was educating me on this equipment in this infectious disease world. And she's pointed out, it's like, oh, you seem really good. Have you ever considered doing this type of job that I do? And she actually pointed me out into a job opening, exactly what she was doing. And I took the chance and applied for it. And 10 years later, here I am, pretty much. So the transition has pretty much happened just because someone saw my potential on this new era, and so what I was capable to do, and my fascination with all the infectious disease topics that she was educating me in. And yeah, that's how I transitioned to scientific affairs at this company.
And before we jump to my next question, I see we have a question from Dora. She says, how was the transition for you from grad school to industry? And how did you decide between working first after undergrad and going in directly into graduate school? So maybe can you hit on first just talking about the transition from graduate school to industry work and what that was like?
Yep. So definitely, I mean, it's very different, academia and industry, right? I'll say when you graduate, you go into real world in terms of, uh, you know, you have to become an adult. I'll say, like, I still enjoy my grad years because I'm still not in the real world. I'm still there, but um, in all honesty, I mean, it's to go outside the comfort zone. Um, I mentioned before, right? I did have this fork in the road where I did apply for a postdoc, and then I applied for this DNA analyst job, which is completely different. And I could have just go be more comfortable and go into that postdoc, which in all honesty was going to be like a revolving door for me because I was going to do the same type of studies and research that I was doing in grad school. So I was not going to gain new skills. So I decided to get outside that my comfort zone and then just choose the forensic, because I know if I go to this side, I'm gonna learn new skills. I'm gonna start thinking outside the box of my research cap thinking as I was in a student, and that actually kind of bridge a little bit, narrow my jumping into industry much better, the transition, because I already made that mindset already when I choose something different. So that's a key here. Like sometimes you have the opportunity to jump directly from the academia to industry, and that's fine. That's more like a culture shock, honestly, I think, compared to making a transition from academia to some clinical job, and then from there going back to the industry. You will gain more experience that way, more skills that way, that can put you a better position when you are applying for the industry, which can be sometimes very competitive. um, you know, industry is not looking into your grades, and it's not looking
Mm.
into whether you published in a high, journal. It does counts you publish, but doesn't really. It's a clinical journal or a ABC journal. It's still a manuscript that you wrote, and it's still those skills that you need for the industry side. So those are the skills that industry tends to look more. So again, the different mindset is completely different. So it's not impossible to go and jump directly, but my suggestion is always get more skills, um, making a transition to something else, and then from the industry side jump.
So, Kaisha, let's then talk about, what exactly is scientific affairs? What does that mean? And then we'll kind of talk a little bit about like a typical day for you.
Yeah. So scientific affairs, I mean, it all depends on, each company will have a different description of scientific affairs. From For my company, scientific affairs pretty much contributes scientific expertise to other teams within our company or directly to our customers. So we do like to use this bridge analogy where, we are the bridge between different internal teams, from research and development like R&D, marketing, clinical affairs, the commercial team, which are the sales team, and then link that within the organization and the whole external customers. So just for us, in my team here in DiaSorin, we are field based. So we do travel constantly, to travels to conferences, to um, you know um, acquire a little bit more knowledge, continue education. For us, we do travel with key opinion leaders to have meetings with them. These are experts, sometimes that help us to keep up with what is in upcoming trends and what is happening in the field in terms of anything partake that we have to consider as a company, right? We are at the end of the day for patient care as a diagnostic company. Um, and typical for us, as you mentioned, right? We do a lot of things. I think we do a lot of different hats. We do collaborate with lab professionals, clinical researchers, scientists. We do a lot of clinical studies, research studies, which the goal of those studies is to help improve the outcomes, patient outcomes, especially when it comes to infectious diseases. We do a lot of educational and scientific presentations to improve awareness, to knowledge about these infectious disease topics. They are trending. We do also create, scientific content for internal use, external
Mhm.
use, like presentations, white papers, manuscripts, posters, and then we do a lot of support to our regulatory affairs team and a lot of the 510K FDA submissions. A lot of our products are FDA clear products, so we have to submit to the FDA. We do help on reviewing, to making sure everything from the scientific content, from the technical content looks good. So we are pretty much educators and supporters for every of the different internal teams in the scientific content. Um, so that's why we need to be experts pretty much in everything partake on infectious diseases, especially for the molecular division in DiaSorin.
Yeah, you mentioned, I think in our, one of our previous conversations that, you mentioned like continually educating yourself. There's a lot of reading. There's,
Yes,
before we went live, you were talking about like you had a stretch there where you flew to Utah for a conference, then over to Boston for a conference, then back down to Maryland. So that lots of reading, lots of continuing education, going to conferences. That's is a big part of the job.
it is. It is. It's definitely. I mean, it's never stops. And that's one of the biggest thing for scientific affairs. If you want to be a team member like that, you need to be independent on reading publications, what is there, what is trending, continue. And when I say about pretty much everything, I have to learn about fungal diseases today, and then next day is about viruses, and then the next day is bacteria that I have to start talking about. So the topics is very broad, which is great because you know uh, I do tend to get bored easily.
Mm.
So it keeps me on my toes to just to learn, be in those conferences as you mentioned, right? Like one day I'm in Utah, and then all of a sudden I have to fly to Boston to attend another conference, which is great for networking, great for meeting new um, key opinion leaders and the experts, and have conversations with them, what's going on, and then learning about new topics. So it's a continuous cycle that never stops. And now, honestly, so we have to keep up all the time just to make sure, as scientific experts, not only internally for our internal teams, but also to support the customers outside.
We talked to in our last conversation, just and you've talked about it here, just the amount of communicating and communication that you just have to do in general. And how do you get more comfortable doing stuff like that? Is it just like repetition? Is it it sounds like preparation is a big part of it, because if you know the material well, you'll be able to talk about it better, I think, obviously. But how do you get more comfortable with that? And any kind of tips there you can provide?
Yeah, definitely knowing helps, right? Because you feel comfortable, as you mentioned now. You feel confident on what you are communicating. So I will say practice makes perfect. Honestly, I was not great at the beginning. I mean, I coming from Puerto Rico, which Spanish is my first language. We do learn English, but of course, my afraid of my accent, and that's a mental block that you tend to have, and what if I'm not being clear enough and things like that. So definitely practice makes perfect. You develop, the more that you do it, you will become more comfortable talking, even having these interviews live, things like that. And it's for scientific affairs, you definitely need that communications skill. You need that public speaking. We do a lot of sometimes presentations to conferences. So where I'm talking in front of experts. So definitely knowing the material, be comfortable, even speaking about it. Definitely takes time, but for developing that skills, as a grad student, I do remember having that seminars, right? Every semester I will have presenting my project in front of my fellows, within my class. And sometimes it's just once per semester, which I think is not enough. In all honesty, I wish that if the PIs encourage more that information, or encourage more that speaking, even in meetings, lab meetings, weekly or things like that, that helps. But also for the students, going to conferences where they can sign up for oral posters and small presentations, just go for it. It more and more that you do it, it helps you to feel more comfortable in your own skin, and then be able to to do a little bit more of those presentations. Writing is also very important to do. So manuscripts and posters and things like that also helps you to develop the skills. um, there's seminars, there's also a lot of now classes online that you can take advantage of those. I wish I had those back then, although I'm not that old, but obviously technology has advanced way since COVID. But yeah, take seminars, take those classes, whatever workshops, just to help you feel comfortable, especially in the speaking area. So,
Awesome. Okay, we have two new questions. Kaisha, I'm going to be cognizant of your time. Do you have a few more minutes to stick with us? All
yeah.
right, great. So Dora is another question. She says, I'm interested both in microbiology, immunology, and public health. I have been looking for an intersection between these two fields. Which industry would you say encompasses the scientific research aspect of microbiology? Sorry, I have to hide it to see the rest of the question, but also uses these in solving public health challenges, specifically infectious diseases?
That's a good question. And I will say it's not so much um, the industry field. It all depends on what you want to do more. Like if you want to do research and development, R&D is a great way to start in the industry. Um, you also have scientific affairs. I'm gonna sell it here because it's great. I love it. What I do, it's actually a really good, um, actually encompass pretty much what you are describing. A little bit of the microbiology and immunology and some of the public health challenges. Um, but again, it all depends on where you're applying. If you want to keep it government, like being in the FDA, being part of that, or you want a public health entity, or you want more the industry side. So definitely, Dora, if hit me later, and I can give you a little bit more examples based on my experience. And but definitely, pretty much what you're describing there, it's scientific affairs role plays a lot of what you're looking for in terms of the industry side.
All right. And then we have a question from John Miller. He says, hello, I'm a current PhD student in the microbiology and immunology program at URMC. Can you estimate the percent of the time you are traveling to conferences, et cetera, and are you remote the rest of the time? Sorry, again, going to hide it. Are you required to be in specific cities where the company is located for these positions? Thank you.
So again, it all depends on your role and depends on the company. For my company, we as a group we have a territory within the U.S. that I do cover. We also support part of Canada, Latin America, Caribbean, and we also support some colleagues in Europe, in Australia. So at least my team is a little bit more global. Um, and so traveling, It all depends on exactly what activity you will be doing as part of the traveling. But in all honesty, I mean, I'm very grateful that at least for my team, we accommodate that traveling within my schedule. So there's no one telling me what to do. I mean, we are very independent. We just have to make sure communicate this to my boss, which is the chief scientific officer. Um, but the traveling itself, I'll say is 60 to 70% of the month. And then if I'm not traveling for conferences or meetings or support that I do with the customers, I am at home, my home base, and then I work from there to have additional meetings, to virtual meetings, to do then be able to review documents, create content, and things like that. So at least within my company, it's like 60, 70% traveling, and then the rest is just at home.
All right. Thanks so much for the questions, everybody. I just have one more thing, and that would just be, if there's any one piece of advice you want to leave us with today, for our graduate trainees, or anybody else tuning in that needs some career guidance or grad school guidance, what would that be?
I have two, if I can.
Yeah.
Um, so for the students, definitely, I will say I was given this piece of advice from a teacher in my sixth grade, which I still go for it, and is to be multidisciplinary thinker. And what that means, if you are interested in the industry side, even in any aspects outside the academia, I think being this multidisciplinary thinker, it's great. What that means is pretty much, um, we tend to go into a triangle of knowledge, as I call it, where we start with this broad base. And then the more and more we go into grad school, we tend to narrow our knowledge a little bit. And the piece of advice that she told me is like, don't be that triangle of knowledge. Yes, you can be an expert of one single thing, but you can be actually an expert of many things. So when it comes to the industry, that actually resonates very well, especially for the job that I do, right? I need to be an expert of many things in order to educate, create awareness, be helpful to my fellow internal teams from the scientific content portion. So, if you want that mindset of the industry side, be that multidisciplinary thinker, broad your skills, broad your knowledge, and be an expert of many things. And then for the veterans out there, professors and other leaders that out there, my advice for you is to pay it forward. I honestly um, love how people in different parts of my career actually look for the potential in me. So look for the potential in others and actually call it out. I think I would not be here if someone didn't see the potential, and like I said, in many aspects of my career, like from the teacher who said, "Oh, you can be a really good scientist," which is my sixth grade teacher that I still love, and from my colleague who saw some potential in me during the training, and she said, "Oh, you could be really good in industry," and then that's one of the reasons that I'm in industry. So just pay it forward, and if you see the potential in the students, see the potential in others, just call it out. Sometimes we don't see that potential, right? We are so focused, but someone else will see it, and you calling it out actually can influence the view how we see ourselves. So those are the two advices that I will say that you know hopefully you guys appreciate it.
Well, thank you for paying it forward, and bringing your knowledge and career story to our U of R community. Really appreciate it. If folks want to connect with you after this, where's the best place to do that?
Definitely LinkedIn. I'm very active in there. I like to post and create awareness all the time. So I'm always checking my LinkedIn. That's my social media, I will say. So yeah, please reach out. I'm happy to answer any additional questions and have more conversations.
Well, thank you so much again, Kaisha. It's been a great conversation. Really appreciate you taking all the time to come on and talk with all of us today. And for the audience, again, if you missed any of this video will be available as recording right after we wrap up the live stream here. And don't forget to check out more episodes, other great conversations with some of our graduate school alumni. It's called the Next Step Podcast. It's on YouTube and YouTube Music. So yeah, I think that does it for us. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the latest episode of the Next Step Podcast. If you liked what you heard, please share with other members of the University of Rochester community or anyone you think could benefit from these career stories. And we wish you nothing but the best in your own career journey. Until next time.